Hi there, and thanks for checking out my video. So this is the third DX7 that I repaired, and there are three main issues on here. One was the power supply. There was a resistor that was gone on there. There was a crack in the PCB where these buttons are mounted on. So button 28 didn't work. I thought it was the button itself. I replaced all the buttons and it still wasn't working, and then I found the crack that had actually taken a trace out with it. And then the other thing was there'd been some kind of event on the MIDI ports, arcing or something, which had taken out a few of the components. They'd been replaced, but there was sort of a dry track or a broken track on the PCB there. So that's the three main things. And also, of course, the battery change. That's quite straightforward. General tidy up, I stripped it right down. General tidy up, there's a bit of glue that was causing me grief here, but in the end I just removed it mechanically. And yeah, it's pretty much as good as new now. So hope you enjoy the video. So we're in South Wales. It should have taken us 2 hours to get here, but it took us kind of 4 hours because a truck hit one of the gantries in Avonmouth this morning. So that took a while, but also on the bridge, on the Severn Bridge, the new one, coming the other way, there was another accident we saw which was blocking everything up from that side. So I don't know if we're going to catch that one on the way back, so we'll see. Anyway, we're nearly there, 16 minutes, and we shall get the DX7. So we're on our way back now, going over the first Severn crossing. It's 20 to 11. I think the other one must be pretty much totally shut because Google Maps brought us this way. So yeah, should be home just before midnight, I guess. So here it is then in the daylight. First impressions, yeah, there's something loose there. That might be just the nut on the potentiometer, or the whole frame that's holding the potentiometer might be loose there. That one seems okay. Just a bit of grime. I guess it's been stored in a loft or something. But on the back, now the guy that sold it to me, he's had his father-in-law, who sadly passed away last year, had this, and he did this mod, which is quite a common mod actually. They take the battery. There's a memory backup battery in here, and a lot of people replace them. They last about 10 years, but a lot of people also put this external thing on so they can change the battery without going deep into the machine and resoldering things. So yeah, there's that. It came with a RAM as well, a card which has got a memory protect on, so that's a rewritable one, just one of those. Yeah, so that's the top. It looks okay. Some of these buttons, I mean, some feel a bit brighter returning than others. So I think sometimes they get full of grime, or the springs start to go whatever inside. So I might need to replace some of those little tacked switches there on the PCBs, but we will see. The key action sounds good. There's nothing clunky or noisy about that, so that should be okay. Bit of fluff in there, which is, you know, you always see that. And on the other side then, so when I turned it over, there was a bit of a rattle, so there's something floating around inside. So what I'm going to do with this one, I won't fire it up until I've opened it up and had a bit of a check around or a clean around, because I don't want anything shorting PCBs out in there that might be loose. A few screws missing, which, you know, you see that also. I've got some spares somewhere. That's actually quite loose there, so maybe recently someone's been in and had a look, I don't know, but yeah, I think it will clean up okay. Nothing too serious. So bottom panel's off then, and the first thing I noticed was that there are quite a few screws missing out of the power supply board, so that's obviously been out at some stage. This would have come out for the battery repair there, and the key bed doesn't look too bad. The looseness of this looks like it's due to the little hex nut on the potentiometer there that's come loose, so that should be an easy fix. The thing that was rattling was one of these, so that could have caused an arc or a short circuit somewhere. So I'm going to turn these two PCBs over and have a look at the other side. The nice thing about this is that you can flop this over with it still connected actually, and run it in that situation carefully. So yeah, I'll take those out and start looking for things that might have gone wrong. So I've just checked the outputs of the power supply board. So these pins here, you've got plus 12, 5, plus and minus 12 and 5 on these, and I can't see anything obvious on there. Power's going in for sure, but there's nothing of any use coming out of those terminals at all. So I'll start checking caps for shorts, and then these for sort of diode behavior, to see if I can find the fault. So just looking at this switch mode power supply then, so that soldered component that's sticking through right in the center of the screen there, there's a little crack. I don't know if you can see, there's like a little flake coming up just near the base of that post where it comes through. It's hard to see on this iPhone because the zoom's not great, but I'm not saying that's the issue here, but it sure as hell isn't going to help. So I'm going to just go around board, look for a few more like that, and just wet them off again to see if that fixes anything. I know it's a common thing on the little transformer there. Sometimes you get that with vibration things, they start to peel away, but it doesn't look too bad there. Yeah, I'll do that quickly and see if that makes a difference. So resoldering didn't really make any difference to the output there. So I carried on looking around the board for things that might not be working properly, and I found just now that one of these isn't working. So what this is, there's two quite big resistors, and they control the rate of discharge of those capacitors. Basically on a switch mode power supply, you've got two sides. You've got the high voltage AC to DC side, so this converts mains to some DC levels, and then that's switched over to this side via this JFET or this transistor here, and that is basically the timing of that switching is managed from this side by this optocoupler, which is used to feedback. So there you've got an LED in there and a photo transistor, and that's used really for safety because and on all these kind of switch mode power supplies you'll see two discrete sides of the board, a high voltage and a low voltage side, and you have sort of a break in all the tracks to keep it safe. But anyway, so this one, that should be 4.3 ohms and it's reading 6.3, so I don't know what's going on there, but when I change these over to this one, I need to have a stand for the camera really, then that's just gone open loop. Okay, so for sure that one has failed. That might have been caused to fail by something else going wrong, but I won't know until I sort of get some new ones and put them in and try that, and then it might work. Hopefully it will, but we'll see. So I found some of those online and got them on order from Mauser actually, and so while I'm waiting for those, I'm going to look at this board, clean it up, and change or put a new battery on there. You can see actually here where the chap who had it before put the soldered these wires on to come out to the box for the battery replacement. So I'll take this out and see what it looks like. So this is the main board then, just taken out and turned over, and straight away you can see there's a bit of dust on the port where the cartridge was plugged in. That's fine. Generally it looks okay. I mean, you won't really see much unless anything's gone bang in here. This is where the battery's going to go, and it's labelled up positive and negative, so that's easy to identify. And I've got one of these CR2032s which comes with a little connectors on there. Okay, now the spacing on those is a bit wider than the spacing that they've given you on the PCB, so I do actually have to drill into one of the copper tracks on the other side there, which I've done before, so that shouldn't be too difficult. So I didn't drill a hole because the PCB is different to the one that I did before. When I've done this before, there was more room on the board, so maybe I had a different version board. So what I've done instead is just bent those legs in. I don't know if you can see that. Bent those legs in just to bring those hole centers closer to each other. So that should be okay. So I'll put that one in now. So really easy then. and should be good for another 10 years or so. So whilst finishing up on that battery job, notice there's this lump here, which is actually a leg of a resistor which somebody's put in, and also notice there was a bit of a work here on that soldering on this IC, and some of that was a bit rough. I've just been around to reflow it just to make sure it's wetted through the hole there, but turning over, notice there's some resistors there which look too big. So I think what's happened here is they've been replaced, and perhaps the guy that did it only had those in his box, which is fine because it's just, you know, higher wattage but the same value hopefully, and they are indeed, there's some other resistors having the same value nearby, so I think that's okay. And this is the MIDI section, so I think that's okay. The other thing I noticed was with this chip, because it had been replaced, I checked it on my schematics I've got, which I've used before, and then realised that it was the wrong chip. Started looking for the right chip to compare it to that one, and then realised that my schematics for a different version of the board. So I think I've got a newer board, actually, one of the newer ones. So that was a little bit confusing for a few minutes, but yeah, I think it's okay now. Yeah, another thing I've noticed is R54 there is missing. It's been cut off. There's a blob of solder and what's left of the legs there underneath, but that's gone, and I've no idea what that is. My schematics can't tell me, and it looks like it's conditioning voltage for this board here, this IC here, which is one of the Yamaha voice chips, YM3609. So I'm pretty sure I'm never going to find a data sheet for this, because this is proprietary stuff. So I don't know, I'm going to leave that, and then if things don't work after I get it back together, then I might use the saying, if in doubt use 10k, and just put something there and see what happens. But it's a bit risky with this, because if I break this, then it's game over really. So going back to the pitch bend wheel then, which is this one, it was a bit loose, and that's because the hole, if you can see the hole, that hex nut in there that should hold everything onto the bracket, hold the potentiometer onto the bracket, that's come loose over time, so that's quite an easy fix. So I'll strip that down, give it a clean up, put some switch cleaner in there as well, actually, which I'll do to all the pots on this one. That's okay there, but I'll just get all the grime out and give it a clean up. So I'm going for the full disassembly on this one, actually, mainly because there's dirt behind the screen here which I want to get out, but it looks like this has been replaced, so these, I'm pretty sure it should look like that, but this one has got a different one on there, and that's stopping this whole board coming off, because maybe they've glued it on, or someone's glued it on. So I'm going to have to break that with some cutters to relieve it from the top of the pot there, because I don't really want to rip the plastic piece out of the potentiometer and ruin that. So yeah, it's all coming apart nicely. So that was on quite well, and I had to add some strain to it to try and deform that hole so it let go. So there's a bit of glue in there, so that was good. And then the stem on there is okay, so that was a success. But just look at the grime. So, I mean, this is normal stuff, really, normal grime, but this will all clean up pretty well, I think. So the key bed then, it's in really good condition, obviously a little bit dusty, and to get these keys off, there's a plastic strip here, this thing that wraps around, just a bit of edging material really, which wraps around that edge and stops the keys going that way. But once that's off, these just push back like that and then lift out, and there's a spring. Sometimes a spring comes with it, sometimes it falls out, but when it comes with it, it sits in there like that, so that's how it fits. And there's a little notch in one end, you see, so if you take that out, That's the notch, and it's sort of biased that way a little bit. I expect it started life being straight many years ago, but sort of warped a little bit over time. Anyway, I'll finish these, and then everything else is in bits. These are the ends. There's the strip there for the controls. Box of bits there, electronics. So it's everywhere now. But when I got the time, I'll start just to clean it up and get it all back together. There's a few things that need some attention. So there's a split screw post there. So I'll mix up some epoxy, get it in the gap, then sort of tie it with a cable tie or clamp it somehow while that goes off. And I might just fill it with epoxy, then pre-drill it for the screw when it goes back together. But apart from that, yeah, it seems okay. Don't know if this works. The pressure strip, I suppose I could test it with a voltmeter. I might do that in a second when it's a bit cleaner. But yeah, it's going okay. So I've just washed all the keys with a bit of laundry detergent. Just one wash and a rinse in the sink. And all the grime has come off quite easily, so I'll put that in the airing cupboard tonight now, and then tomorrow should be all dried up, ready to refit. So I've got all the plastic pieces cleaned up as well, and I've got this split here where maybe the wrong screw is used or too much torque or something. But what I'm going to do is drill a hole through that web there, and then put some glue in the crack, and then tie some wire around it just to give it some extra support. All the others are okay. There's been a bit of, looks like heat kind of mischief there. Don't know what that's due to. Maybe I'll know when I look at the mating part or whatever's close to it. But these cleaned up quite well. It's just a few scuffs and scratches from the years of use and sliding around. So yeah, so I'll do that now and see how that goes. So that was fairly straightforward then, just tying that round to bind it. Got a bit of a dribble there actually, I'll tidy that up in a minute, and then obviously keep the glue you've mixed up just to test that it's gone hard enough for you to, or for me to trim that little bit of wire off there to tidy it up, but that's gone all the way around and through the hole. I think that'd be okay. So these resistors then, so this is the one that went open loop. This is a 4.3 ohm resistor. I was a little bit worried because there's a K there after, but I think that's the tolerance. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's not a 4.3 kilo ohm. It wouldn't be, I don't think, with that kind of setup, but I measured that one and it's 4.3, so that one seems to be okay, but that one's gone open loop. And these are the replacements I've got, close as I could find in ceramic, non-inductive things. So I'll put those on. If I can get the holes to line up, I should be okay. Bit of work maybe, but then we'll see what happens. Okay, so this is genuine first time switch on. Those two are on there. Looking okay. Got an earth there for the multimeter, and then I'll just plug this in. That's on. There's a new fuse in there. Hopefully it won't go bang. Let's have a look. Right, so nothing's serious has happened. Let's see if I can get some readings. Change hands. Really do need a tripod or something for this stuff. Right, so let's go on the 12 volts, 16. Now I did adjust that one just to move it to see if that made any difference. That will change the voltages, but 16 is unloaded. When it's connected to the machine, it might come down. So what I'll do, I'll adjust this down so I get the correct voltages here, and that'll probably drop a little bit when it's all connected up and powered. Maybe, I don't know, depends how good the control is on this, but I'll change it anyway. So right, so that was the 12, which is giving me 16. The 5 is not doing anything on that one. Where's the other 5? Let's try that other one. Right, so we've still got a problem somewhere. That's not working properly. Okay. Right, so I'll go around the board. Let's try the -12 actually. Right, so that should be okay. And the 5 volts I need to have another look, don't I? That's a shame. Yeah, okay, right, I'll do a bit more examination of that board to see what I can find. So it turns out then that it was working, but I was using AG as my ground, but the 5-volt ground is DE by the looks of it. So when I connect the negative to DE, then the positive is 5 volts there. I get that. So that's, well, it was 7, but I need to adjust the trim pot there. So yeah, I think that's okay. It's not getting hot or anything crazy, so I think that's okay. So this is the aftertouch strip then, which is under this felt, and it measures about 18.5K unloaded, and then when you start pressing this, it drops down quite rapidly, and I don't know if it's the right rate or whatever, but it seems to be responsive, and so I think I'll just put it back in and see how it goes. I've used switch cleaner to get all the grease off of these pegs, and I think I need some grease on there as well just to replace it, so I'll see what grease I've got for that. But yeah, a bit of rust here and there, but it's not too bad. This side's okay, that's the underneath, but yeah, that'll be all right. So these are the keyboard contacts then, and there's a lot of dust and stuff which I'll clean out. I'll also go along and check all of these diodes, just sort of directional check to make sure they're working in the right direction properly, and then also look at the alignment on those. So I don't know if you can see that, but there's 1 or 2 of those little switches that's higher than the others, and they're the ones that will need adjusting. It's just simply a case of bending these leaves down, giving them a bit of a bend to get them lined up. So the way this works then, the CPU scans all of these switches like hundreds or thousands of times a second, and then when it breaks a contact there, it starts a timer running, and it measures the time it takes for it to close the contact at the bottom when you press a key, and that's the velocity. So it works out the key velocity, which you can set to change volume or other effects in the synth. Okay, that's the end cheeks together then. This side, when it was disassembled before, that slot, that tang hadn't, or that piece hadn't gone into this slot properly, and it was all a bit buckled here, so I had to straighten that out a little bit. But that's okay now, nice and clean. And then this side, so that's the repair I made to that post that was split. Also, I found that one had snapped off as well, maybe because of me when I was taking it apart, or maybe, who knows. But I had to glue that on there, which you can see there's a little pool of glue just in there around the bottom of that post. Now, there's not really much force on that, so I don't think that's going to move very far, so that should be fine. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. So that's the key switches back onto the keyboard frame. 14 screws there, done up sort of not very tight, because I think this is only sort of quite soft nylon or something. You don't want that distorting as time goes on. I did notice that a lot of these don't really line up with the holes very well, but yeah, that one's a bit over there, isn't it? But there's no way of adjusting that. It's not this that's moved. As long as that's sort of going to be pressed with the key, the little stem on the bottom of the key there, I think it should be fine. So I'll leave that as it is. I think I won't try and interfere with that. That one's not looking great, is it? But no, I think that'll be fine. That'll be okay. Giving the felt a bit of a brush just to liven it up a bit without taking too much off, and then making sure there's no dust or fluff in there from the felt left behind. Yeah, I think that should be okay. Right, so this is where things are getting a bit tricky. So there's dust behind the lens on the LCD, behind the bezel there, and there's only a tiny little gap between the glass. You see it's about a 1mm gap, and of course first thing I did was glue down it, and then that made things a lot worse there. So I've squirted some of that down through the gap to try and flush out some of the debris. It's not too bad, but there's still a bit there, look, which is dissolving or doing something. I think it looks like a bit of flux in there or something. So now this is held on. You can see just the ends of some adhesive strips that we use there. So that's adhesive on the LCD. So I might be able to soften that and pull it off and do a better job and even seal that gap up so stuff can't get in there in the future. So I might have a go at that, but obviously it's turning into a mechanical problem with adhesives, which is never the best thing with LCD screens. But yeah, fingers crossed. Then I'll have a look. So I've managed to wash it through with a bit of switch cleaner, and also I poked up a bit of business card, just got through the gap there, and it's better than it was. I just need to wait for that to dry out there, and then I think that's probably good enough actually. I'll see what it's like when it's in. And if I've got to do it again, I've got to do it again. Well, that's the left hand end on with these four, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 self tappers. This end's got to go on. Before you do that though, make sure you feed the power supply back in, otherwise you'll be redoing the plug, taking the plug off, and then I'll put the other end back on. So just be a bit careful with the screw selection when you're putting these ends back on. So this is, if you look at the height of that step, that's quite short. So that's going to be one of these screws, 12mm or something. And then the ones on this side, you've got quite a deep recess here. So you can use the longer self tappers, right? And because they're self tappers, when you put them back in, turn them counterclockwise until it drops into the original thread, because you don't really want to be cutting a new thread there and ruining the strength in the hole. So that's a little tip there. So yeah, long ones in the front, short ones in the back for that one. This glue's still setting, so I've got to go easy on it, although it's already in and in place. It should be okay. So rekeying then, I've got all the keys I've washed with laundry detergent, and they've been drying in the airing cupboard for a few hours, all nice and warm and dry. And I know, because I took a photo of the keyboard before I started, there's a C, and then a black, then a D, then a black, then 2 whites. But with this kind of key arrangement, you've got to put all the blacks on first. So once I've done a black, a space, and a black, and then 2 spaces, and then another black, space black, space black, then I got the pattern, that's 1 octave, and then I could just follow it through. And I did this before once and got to the end and realised they were all over, they're all wrong, so it can be quite annoying if you get it wrong, this. But anyway, so it's always good to take a photo before you start. So reinstalling the keys then, you've got the notch at the bottom of the spring there, that goes against that post, focus there, and then the spring goes under that little bridge. This is the black notes I'm doing first, obviously, and then on the second peg you just put it on, you put those little hooks through the gaps there, and then that spring's got to sit in the little notch there, and then you just push it back and that back hook goes in, and that's hooked against the plate, and then you're good to go. So that's fine. I think the white keys are a similar thing. Just grab one. Yeah, I think the white keys don't have where you put it underneath. I'll have a look in a minute anyway. I'll do one in a second when I get to it. But yeah, it's as easy as that if you know how to do it. So that went okay. I had a few squeaky ones here and there, but I think it was just where the spring didn't quite engage in the right place. So now it's quite smooth. It's such a nice action on the DX7. I know a lot of people who use DX7s just as a MIDI device to drive their other kit, and because the keyboard is so nice. And so this strips on here as well, which stops these pushing back, so they stay in place. So that's good. I'll look at getting it into the frame now, and then get the aftertouch PCB on for the next step. So we're all back together then functionally, so a lot of the PCB screws aren't in case I have to take them out, and obviously the base isn't on yet, so I can get to things underneath. I've just turned it on upside down to set the -12 +12 voltages using the little trim pot in there, so that's fine now, that's reading okay. It's cleaned up quite well. There's still a bit of a stain from some sellotape adhesive there, which I'm going to try some WD-40, that might be able to dissolve that. There's a bit of oil on there because I tried vegetable oil as well. That was one thing I saw online. But apart from that, it's not too bad. The keys feel nice. So this is it. First time I'm going to turn it on then, the right way up with the screen in view. Let's see what happens here when I turn it on. Oh wow, it's got everything. That's cool. So it hasn't even lost its settings because of the battery issue. So that's good. So what I'll do, I'll get probably that one plugged in and see if I can get some sounds. So this is typical of what happens when the battery dies inside or you disconnect it, which is what I did in effect. All the voice names become just corrupted. So if I choose different voices, you just get these hieroglyphics here because it's just random noise in the memory, unfortunately, but that's fine. But the buttons seem to work. 64. No, I've got some buttons there that aren't. That one's not very happy. I think the button track hasn't gone in very straight, so I'll have to pull that out again and have a look at that. But I'll see if I can get some sounds out of it in a second. So it looks like it's not reading the cartridge. This is my cartridge from an old machine that does work. So if I select cartridge there and then choose one, we just get blanks up. So it looks like it's saying it's empty or there's no data because it's blocking all these characters right out. So I'll need to have a look at that. But I'm going to do, there must be a reset somewhere. I've got to get the documentation out and try and do I think there's a switch on reset or something somewhere along the lines. I'll have to look for that. But if you can see there's a gap here, not much of a gap there. So I think some of these keys are already a bit depressed or something. That 28's not working for some reason. Anyway, I'll fix that. So one mistake I made then, and I think I forgot this from last time I did a DX7, is that I installed the keys with this sensor strip in place, and what happened was when I was testing the notes, a few of them didn't work, and that's because the little plastic peg that pushes on the sensor on the switch was actually bending the switch out of the way, so it actually caught on the end and bent it up, which is pretty risky because if you bend those things about too much, obviously they're going to fatigue and snap off. But so I've just had to take that out and then just readjust some of those because they were bent right up, which is, yeah, I was a bit scared when I saw it, but it seems okay now and they're all nice and straight. So yeah, lesson learned there. Install that after you put the keys back on, and then before it's installed into the machine. Okay, so I've got to try and clear this this funny stuff that's going on here in the memory. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press edit there, go and press number 14 until that comes up with initialize, internal memory protect, that's on. I'll change that to off, then press that one, cartridge protect, I'll turn that off anyways as well, cartridge protect, then go through till I get init voice, and I'll click yes, are you sure? So that's blown out the voice memory for that. Okay, so then that should give me just a sine wave, and normally I should be able to build a patch from that, but because it was a flat battery problem, there are other sort of artifacts in memory which is causing it to play up. So if I play a note and change the modulation wheel to change the pitch, turn it up a bit, there it says MIDI data error, so something's not right there, and I'm pretty sure that's because there's other corruption in the memory. So what I'm going to do is initialize this by pressing buttons 1 and 2 whilst I'm turning it on. So I'll try that now and see what happens. Okay. I don't know if you can hear that, but this thing's is possessed, I think. I don't know what's going on. I've had this before with a DX7, it's quite funny how they go wrong. It's just unbelievable. Maybe it is something on the PCB that's not right, you know, a short or something somewhere, but yeah, it's all good fun. So I've wired it up to my KeyStep Pro then as a MIDI device, and there's no MIDI signals going in. MIDI comes out to control other synths, that's fine. Also, I tried using Sysx to put some patches on it, but that didn't work, so I'm pretty sure that MIDI channel is not working, and I think that's the one where they've got the chunky resistor on. Actually, that one's got the chunky resistor on there. You can just see it, there's a lump there. That's the MIDI in. So I've put just a patch. I managed to edit a patch to get something happening. It still breaks up after a while, but at least it's enough to check. But there's nothing firing that's coming in. So I've got the schematic over here. Found it on the web. So I'm just going to check the connections in that circuitry, and then wherever that wire goes off to, probably one of the processors or something, I'll see if that's all connected in the right way. Okay, I found something interesting. So I've got MIDI coming out of there, which should be sounding like this. Right, so I've got to stop that because it's left the note open. Right, sorry, you've got to wait for it to close the note, that's the thing. I'll get that going again. So that should be doing the same thing to the keyboard. I've got a patch on there. I'll just plug that in. But nothing, right? And I've got the scope here looking at the octo coupler. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got nice regular pulses, MIDI stuff going into there. And then when I look around these other components, it all looks like it's doing its thing. And if I follow the schematic then, for that just there, so R31 should be dumping that signal onto that line there, which goes off to the CPU or the MPU. So R31, let's just find that, the scope. R31 is that one. So that's looking healthy. And then scrolling down, follow this line down, that goes into pin 12 of IC3. Does it? Yeah, so P23 is that one, and that one actually. So pin 12 of IC3, my scope on there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Dump that on there. And it's flat as a pancake, so I think I might have a broken track or something in between those. So I'll check that trace. Might even be a sort of dry joint, which would be good because that's easy. So I'll just I'll check that out. Sorry for the video quality. It's a bit of a struggle really. So I've just traced on the board using a multimeter then pin 12, which comes all over here, pops out of the board just near leg 1 of this one, and then goes up, does a little detour around this, that's the slot for the cartridge or connector for the cartridge, another little turn into pin 3 of this Schmidt trigger assembly here, right? And that from there to there is a dry joint. So I think that's what's causing the problem. So your signal from pin 3 of that IC28 there, that's not getting back, or R31 isn't getting back to the input pin of the processor. So that's why that's not hearing the or getting the MIDI notes, MIDI information. However, MIDI in to MIDI through works. I've tested that. So this part of the circuit looks to be okay, and that those SMIT triggers seem to be working. So it's from here to there that's broken. So I'm gonna try it with the jumper wire. Actually, I'm a bit worried that it's wrong because the processor's a Yamaha one, but in the list, the parts list on here, it says it's just an off-the-shelf job. So I'm not 100% sure it's the right pin or the right component. However, the track or the trace, when you chase it through, mostly makes sense. And it's really nice actually that these old schematics have got the PCB traces on, even though it's a bit tricky to follow. It's it really helps. Okay, so I'll turn that on. So that's my horrible patch I created earlier, and I've set my multimeter to milliamp mode, so it will conduct. Basically, I can use it as a you know, to jump things. And then what I'm going to do is place one on. I'm doing this one-handed, which is awkward. Putting one on R31 there, and that one I'm going to touch onto the wire that I've put through in between where I think the dry joint is, and we'll see there. So that's, and it just lost the plot because it's still not right inside, but for sure then that is where the dry joint is, and I've had this before actually. Well, it was a short to ground on these PCBs, so that small so from there, that little line up to this other side of this cartridge slot, there's a break in there somewhere. So I'll put a jumper wire on that, and then job done, I think. Well, that's that part of it. And I think it was all part and parcel of what happened here. So it looks like there's a bit of circuit board missing where that resistor was replaced. So the resistor that was flush on the surface, which was a correct 1/4 watt one, I guess, probably blew because of some electrical problem on MIDI, and that's quite common. It took that with it because that's been replaced, and that one by the looks of it, and may have just burnt out the track there, which shouldn't really do because it's after the optocoupler. Maybe they put a new optocoupler on there, I don't know. But yeah, so that's moving in the right direction, I think. So there's my jumper wire then. I'll fix it with a bit of heat glue later on. But it's coming out of that, where that post comes through, where that hole comes through there. And then I've taken it through this hole because it just seemed convenient really. And then yeah, onto pin 3 of that one. I'll tidy it up tomorrow and glue it down and stuff. Should be fine. I think I'll leave that now for today. So that repair has done the trick then, and I've managed to sysex the 2 banks of the original Yamaha patches onto here. So I've got the marimba there, which is number 22. So that's all fine. The keyboard's working lovely. Now I've got some keys buttons here that don't work. So 15 is a bit hit and miss. No, I didn't catch it then. And then 28, oops, 28 doesn't work at all. So I think I've got some tack buttons or switches I can put in there for that. So I'm just going to have a look for those now and then sort that out. But on the whole, quite pleased with it. I've got a stain there, which is, I believe it's from the sellotape that was holding the external battery on. And I've read that WD-40 can dissolve that. So I'll give that a go, but it's pretty hard on there. Hopefully it's not etched into the paint or the surface, but apart from that, cosmetically it's not too bad. Just to note though about how smart the programming is on this for the sort of age of it, I actually counted my pins wrong and put the this wire up here, so it is sending the wrong signal from the wrong place, and instantly it came up with MIDI error as a message in the screen. So yeah, it's pretty good really that it's got that. And then obviously I just counted the pins from the right way and found that it's I'd soldered it on to the wrong one, so as soon as I moved it to there it was fine. But it means this wire is a bit long now, so I'm going to just trim a few millimeters off there to make it more tidy. So that's looking a bit better. I found these then for the two tact switches that I've got to change. I might just use them all up and see if there's any others that are a little bit sloppy, but I need to get to this board here, maybe even this one again, so everything's got to come out again to do that, but I think it's worth doing whilst it's on the bench. So 50 of these arrived yesterday, the new little tact buttons or switches, and if you compare, so these, I thought a lot of these were okay, but if you listen, then compare to these ones, right, I do that again, they're much brighter, the size is the same, they do look a little bit different, but that's just because they're not 30 years old or whatever. So what I'm going to do is replace all of them, because I think it'll feel the same and sound the same then and last longer. I used to desolder these things, but now I've got some of these little thin snips. I'm just going to go along and snip the legs off, which is much quicker than desolder the pins out and then give it a clean up and drop the new ones in. So yeah, that should be a nice quick job. So I've got that board to do, and then I'll pull that board out as well and do the 10 or so on there. So that one okay, I'll just put one on there. Most of the holes, some of the holes remained open, which is, it makes it easier for putting the legs through. Some are closed over, so I need to just use the soldering iron to jemmy them in. Some dirt on there, I'll clean that up after, but I've cleaned this side up now. Well, it's cleaner than it was anyway, and I'll go and do the rest now to go through them all. So because some of the holes weren't totally clear of solder then, what I did is I pushed, or I held the switch with the legs in the holes on the PCB from the other side, and then I was able to wet each pair of holes off with a soldering iron and get each side to sort of push through one side at a time, and then afterwards went over all of them with the soldering iron again just to reflow it all to make it look neat, and then a quick wash off with some IPA. Need to remove a bit of dust, but I think that's looking okay, and then I'll tidy it up and get it back in the synth. Now if you get to the point where you need to put these PCBs back in, just remember there's a little bit of play in that direction on these, so put them in loose, nip a few of the bolt screws up, and then turn it over and just make sure the buttons are sort of in the middle of the slots that they run in on the front, otherwise it looks a bit uneven. It's more this one really than that one. That one's not so bad, but anyway, just thought I'd mention that. So that's the keyboard in then. I'm not putting all the screws in yet, at least the ones I can reach later on, because I'm going to put the DM board in now, the main board, connect everything up, flip it over and make sure everything's working, just in case there are any issues with these boards, then it's easier to pull out. Obviously I'm not putting the base on either yet. Actually the base will need a bit of work, needs a bit of paint here and there, so I can get some black spray paint for that, but yeah, so I'll put the DM board on and then keep my fingers crossed that everything's gonna work. So then back together, switched on, and this is why you don't put all the screws in. So look at this, 26, 27, 28, still not working on 28, okay, and that's with a new button in there, a new switch, so it must be the diode that one uses is probably gone as well, or there's a dry track somewhere, so yep, got to pull it all out again. So back to the schematic then for the switch board here. Switch number 28 is the one that's not working, which closes S12, and S12 goes off to CN1, which goes through to IC18, right? So S12 is that one, pin 4. So I should be able to follow that all the way through to pin 11 of IC18 to see if it's working. But what I'll do is I'll compare it to the one next door, which I know is working. So S13 is right next to it. So pin 11 and 8 of IC18. If I compare those when I'm pressing the buttons, that should tell me whether or not it's working. So I'll try it on this side. If it looks okay, I'll try the output of that on this side, because it may be this that's broken. And then if that's okay, then I'll check the lines all the way to the processor here to make sure that's receiving. In fact, because that happened to the other one, I would guess that something's going on in here. Actually, a broken track again, maybe. Who knows? Cannot assume, really. I'll check it now. So what I found was then, I checked all these in this plug here, and for sure 28 S12 doesn't drop the voltage when you hold the button in. All the others do. Now that could be because there is a broken track on here, but I'm pretty sure I checked continuity. I might have to do it again if I get stuck, but it could be because here there's a voltage coming back from M4, so I need to chase that down. Perhaps I'll unplug that one actually and see if that makes a difference, because it's preventing the voltage from dropping. We've also got a 5-volt supply here by the looks of it through all that lot via some resistors. But you know, if there's a problem with this, it could be sending the voltage back and stopping it from dropping, maybe. So I'll keep looking. So then on the pin on this thing that corresponds to switch 28, I don't get any change in voltage for pressing the buttons, whereas the ones either side of it I do. But it's a very sort of slow change in voltage, right? Because it's maintained at 5 volts via this 20k row of resistors here on the input side of that chip. So I'm still not sure whether it is a problem with this. So I think before I start carving up this board, which I might do, it might be this that's gone. I've actually had to replace one of these before. But before I do that, I'm going to pull this one again just to blueprint it against the diagram, especially around the diode there, just in case it is that one. So I checked the main board then between this chip and the processor, and also back to the connector, and that's all fine continuity wise. But what I did find was comparing the resistance from the SA line to each line for the pins, or for each of the switches rather. This one doesn't change, whereas these you get a big change in resistance either side. So I think there's something wrong with the connections on that board, or the traces on that board, which is, to be fair, a lot easier than doing things with that, so that's not so bad. So I'll pull it out fully then and try and find that break in the track. So it was kind of satisfying when this happens, but you can see just through the pins there, just under that diode, the leg of that diode, number 28, there's a crack in the board which goes all along there. So I think that's probably what's causing a dry joint somewhere. So yeah, quite pleased to find that, which means I need to somehow reinforce that board with something. I've got some epoxy, whatnot, and some bits and pieces I can probably do that with. But yeah, let's focus back on that crack. You can just see that hairline crack, not so much now because the screen's changed. Oh, there it is, there it is. So I'm guessing then, looking at the root cause of this, it's probably user frustration, because when these buttons start to fail, or these switches, they sort of, when they start to fail, they take a bit more of a push to get them to work, and they might work for a while with a bit more pressure and some massaging, and then they sort of all of a sudden go. And I remember when I looked at this, first of all, the button 28 on the outside was sort of a bit depressed, so I think somebody's really had a go at this, and in frustration to try and get it to pick up the patch, you know. But anyway, so yeah, quite an interesting one that. Haven't seen that before. It's gone around the hole a little bit, there, you can see. So I'll find some adhesive just to support it and just go around wetting those solder joints and checking the tracks as well near there, because I bet that's split there across that track slightly. And I noticed that when I sort of tested for resistance, it responds to stress as well, so resistance changes as you sort of lean on this and twist it. So for sure it's probably a crack that's propagated through the track there and made a dry joint. And of course, like a lot of these things, once you know it's there, then you can actually see it. So you can see the center of the screen there, that is exactly that line, that crack line's going straight through that section. So I'll just scratch that green stuff off the protective layer there and back to the copper and dump some solder on that, and that should fix it. And then I'll go around with some sort of reinforcement, I guess. I might wet these ones off as well again, just to redo them. But yeah, interesting. So that's the surface prepared then. If I can zoom in without losing focus. So I'll dump some solder on that now, which should be enough. And I'll look at reinforcing the board. Okay, so that little mod was done on the switchboard for these. And as you can see, I can now get to patch 28, which wasn't really worth the wait, but anyway, all working now. So all I need to do now is try and fix this issue here with that stain from the tape adhesive, have a bit of a tidy up, paint the, put some paint on here and tidy that up so it looks better. And then find some more screws. I'm a bit short on screws for the final assembly, so I'll dig around for some of those, or maybe have to buy some. But all in all, yeah, not bad. So for the sake of publishing on YouTube then, I'm going to call this one finished because it's all functional and it's cleaned up pretty well. I even had some success in the end with this stain here. The glue came off. It was, I think it was epoxy. There was nothing really I had that could dissolve that without sort of dissolving the paint as well. So I set to it with a magnifying glass and a sharp knife, and it's not too bad. Maybe I'll get some polish on there or something to try and hide that stain, but it's a lot better than it was anyway. So yeah, generally it's cleaned up quite well, I think. To be honest and completely open, yeah, I haven't put the base on yet because I had a bit of a disaster with the paint work. I did one coat of spray paint, then the can was pretty empty, so I got another can. I think it was acrylic. They're both acrylic paints, but I think the solvent or the makeup was a bit different because the second coat actually loosened the first coat and it puckered up and did that. So I need to sort of revisit that again. But like I said, for the sake of publishing and getting it out there, I think I'm going to call this done. So if you don't know DX7s and you're thinking about getting one, if you're on a budget especially, then I just wanted to explain why I think there's so much mileage in these things even now. So a lot of recent music has been made using things like that, where you've got wave shaping options in the menu there, which give you a lot of sort of grainy new types of sounds. Okay, whereas these back in the 80s, they were pretty much used to try and simulate other sounds like pianos and drums and other things. So those kind of new sounds probably weren't kind of thought of back then. Okay, so they were trying to move away from analog synthesizers into this new way of copying or simulating acoustic instruments, I guess. So what I've got here is a brass patch. It's a standard patch 2 that came with the machine. Okay, but what I've done, I've modified the patch so that the feedback loop is connected to the modulation wheel. So if I change that, then you get sort of feedback in there. So it's almost like you've got a filter on there in a way. So if I push that up, you get lots more sort of high pitch elements in the sound. And what I've got is a simple patch running out of the KeyStep Pro through the MIDI cable. And so the DX7s is only a mono machine, but I've got this running into the Zoom box here with a stereo output and a few effects. So I'll run the patch as it is. And it's only coming out of the speakers, so I'm not using an interface to record this, so apologies for that. Let's get the volume up so it kind of works. and I'll get this going. So that's just the patch on its own, and I'll just demonstrate the mod wheel. So already not a bad sound as it is, but I'll put the delay on. So that's a stereo delay, and then I'll put the reverb on. It's got quite a long tail. I don't know how much of that you can pick up, but it sounds quite lush to me.